Hello, good morning. My name is Francisco and I'm from Energy Cities. I would like to welcome you to the first webinar of the Smarter Together project. This webinar is going to have Bruno Guédon from Lyon, from the SPUL, and he's going to speak about the self-consumption, PV collective self-consumption and the challenges that it poses for everyone. So Energy Cities, we are the replication leads in the Smarter Together project. The Smarter Together project is one of the second generation Smart Cities and Communities project funded by Horizon 2020. And the goal is to deploy in the lighthouse cities of Lyon, Munich, and Vienna, and also with the follower cities of Santiago de Compostela, Sofia, and Venice, solutions in the field of district heating and renewables, so low energy districts with building retrofit, deployment of sustainable e-mobility services, integrated infrastructure like data platform and smart lamppost, and citizen engagement measures. Energy Cities is the replication lead of this project, and we are specifically responsible for a three-level replication. So for the transfer of solutions and learnings from the lighthouse cities to the follower cities, to support the lighthouse cities in the replication activities outside the demonstration zones, and to the transfer of solutions outside the project boundaries through the Club of Cities, which are invited to participate in several activities like this webinar and other peer-to-peer workshops and conferences that are organized within the framework of the project. So this webinar will cover the PV, so photovoltaic and renewable energy and low carbon energy. So we'll be dealing with the PV photovoltaic collective self-consumption that is challenging and is one of the most hot topics in the moment to foster and boost the energy transition in our cities, and to increase also the democratic role of citizens of the energy system in being part of the energy ecosystem and to contribute to the energy system in our urban environments. I'm going to give the floor now to Bruno Guédon from SPUL. He's an electrical engineer and he's a huge expert in PV systems and has been involved in a lot of national but also international projects. And he is now the main technical manager for the Smarter Together project and is also locally in working with the Lyon and the Lyon-Confluence to the deployment of renewable energy systems in the demonstration area in the Smarter Together project. Two notes before giving the floor to Bruno. So Bruno will have a presentation of about 30 minutes, and you, the audience, can then make questions after the presentation. So there will be two levels of questions. You can either raise your hand and speak then after the presentation, or you can just write them on the tab that you have questions, and you can also write them, and Bruno will also be able to see the questions and answer to the questions. The second point is this webinar is going to be recorded, so after this meeting and this webinar, one of the also promoters of this webinar, so the Gopacom, that is the communication lead in Smarter Together, and here with Gabriela Tsinkova, we'll also make this webinar available as a podcast, as a video in the website of the project of Smarter Together. So I hope you have a very nice webinar. You learn a lot, and that you also will be a fan of this very exciting theme that for me and with Bruno that is very expert and very good in this topic. So enjoy, and Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Right now we are going to discuss the collective self-consumption of photovoltaic. This is my first webinar, so I'm quite excited. I hope that everything will run well today. And to make it more convenient, I start my presentation with a picture of myself. Unfortunately, you can't see me today, so you should have it on your screen. Yes, so basically I am a PV consultant, and I have been working in PV for now almost 20 years. And right now, so I have two main tasks. First is to be, as Francisco just said, the technical coordinator of the European funded project Smarter Together. And also I am the subcontractor of a urban developer in Lyon. It's a public company called SPL Lyon-Confluence. And I will explain you just in a few minutes my role and what we try to develop in this area. So here is the agenda of the webinar. So first point will be a short presentation of the Lyon-Confluence urban redevelopment project. And then we will directly switch to the core subject of the webinar, so self-consumption. And we will focus on a challenge that is faced by developers when we try to develop PV systems on collective buildings, so buildings with several users. And I will present you very old projects in the Netherlands and Germany that have been of very great inspirations from the work we do now. And also we will present the framework, so European framework, very short word on the German framework as well, and more detailed some points about the French legal framework related to collective self-consumption of PV. And then I will go into the detail of one specific project we developed now in the Lyon-Confluence area. And I will present to you the two main challenges that we face and the solutions that have been found to overcome those challenges. And right after this, we will switch to your questions that I will try to answer. So here is the playground. So the Lyon-Confluence area in France, which is a very large urban redevelopment project in the city center. It was a former industrial area. And the objective of this urban redevelopment project is to build 1 million square meters of new buildings by 2030. It has started now 20 years ago, so it's already a long story ongoing. And the objective of SPL Lyon-Confluence, so the public urban developer, is to build a zero carbon district. So there are many different definitions for that. But basically, the objective is to maintain the carbon emissions as they were just before the start of the construction of the new buildings. And the project is also done within a partnership with the NGO WWF, within a program called One Living Planet. And this is something that helps the developer to improve the sustainable development of the area. So as you see on this picture, we see a lot of blue on the roofs, and in the area today, we have already 28 PV systems in operation, and this represents approximately 1.8 megawatt peak of PV system. This is quite a good success. I think it's a good success already, because we are downtown in a city center, and it's already a very good achievement to have so many PV systems in this city center. And as you will see, we are developing additional PV systems, and we try to, of course, to do more. Most of those PV systems have a feed-in tariff. It means that all the production is injected into the grid and got a PV tariff, specific tariff for the electricity injected into the grid. This is the case for most of those PV systems. But in this area, we also have already some buildings, some PV systems that are connected to self-consume the production. And why is it the case? As you will see, this is the case mainly because of restrictive conditions to get a feed-in tariff for this specific building, specific PV system. The first example that I can give you is this building. It's the regional government building, which is located in the middle of the area. Massive building, very nice building, designed by Christian de Portes-en-Parc, so very famous architect. And this building, so you can't see it, but this building is equipped with a PV system on the top, on the roof, 150 kilowatt peak. And when the PV system has been designed, when the building was commissioned, it was not possible for some public bodies like regional governments to get a feed-in tariff. This was forbidden by the law, and this is why the building owner, so the regional government, decided to connect the PV system to self-consume the production. And this is the first example I can give you. We have also a second building that uses the PV electricity as self-consumption. This building is right now the flagship of the area. Is very nice. It's also very central in the area. It has been designed by a Japanese architect named Kengo Kuma, and it's a group of 3 buildings, and they are positive energy buildings with PV on the rooftop, so you can see it, and also a very nice looking PV facade for the building that you see in the middle of the plots. And so very well designed, building integrated, but when the building was commissioned, so in 2015, it was not possible to get a feed-in tariff for a PV system that have a power that is bigger than 100 kilowatt peak. And this is why, for this building, also the developer decided to connect it to self-consume the energy and not to sell it to the grid. So 2 examples of past projects that are already using the electricity as a self-consumption, but not due to, let's say, financial reasons, but more as an alternative to these restrictive conditions set by the French law. But things are changing, and things are changing quite quickly. And now I switch to the overall context of energy, and in particular photovoltaic. As most of you knows, I think the cost of PV electricity strongly decreases, and it decreases because we see all over the world a very huge, massive development of PV that make the cost of PV strongly decreases. And even if those massive developments are done in Asia or in the US or in India, the European market benefits from this price decrease. And on the other side, we see the price of electricity from conventional suppliers increases. And this is very specific to suppliers, to countries. But in France, we can say that the increase is very slight, but we see an increase. And we know that for some specific regions, local conditions, the two curves will cross. And when they cross, then we come to a very specific situation where it's cheaper to produce yourself the electricity and to self-consume it rather than to buy it from a conventional supplier. This is what we call grid parity, and grid parity is already reached in some European countries because of very good installations, solar irradiation, because of a specific local electricity price. It's very complex. There are very different situations, but it's ongoing now. When grid parity is there, then we see a strong development of self-consumption projects. And now we should differentiate two situations. First, building with just one single user. And when we have a building with one single user, generally, everywhere, almost everywhere, it's very easy to implement self-consumption, because you just have to connect the PV system as regular appliances within the house. But rather than consuming the energy, the electricity, this appliance will produce energy, and this makes the building user self-consume the energy. So it's very something very easy to implement. And in France and in many countries, we see tons of projects. But this is specific to this kind of building. So buildings with just one single user. And when we switch to buildings with several users, then we see a challenge. And the challenge is how can we share the benefits of PV between the users of the building. And this is the case in particular for multi-apartment buildings. So how can we share the benefits of PV? And I see three different ways to share the benefits of PV. The first one is simply to build a conventional PV system, get a feed-in tariff for the electricity produced, send this electricity to the grid, get revenue thanks to the feed-in tariff, and share the benefits between the users of the building. This is something also quite common, but this is something that is going to be outdated, since the feed-in tariff is something that is going to disappear, or it's going very rare now. So I would say that this was the best way to do it. The other way to do it is simply to physically divide the PV system in several subsystems, and to connect each subsystem in each apartment, each dwelling. And when we do this, we can have many subsystems connected in self-consumption to make this benefit to each flat, each user. But this can be, in some cases, very easy to do, in particular when the building is very small. But when we deal with massive buildings with many users, then it's something expensive, and we can't do it. So very complex, because you have many wires, so this is something that generally is not done. And there's a third possibility to do it. And the third possibility is to share the production data between users. And this is something that we will now discuss in detail, because this is really the subject of the webinar. Where does this come from? So the mentors, and I will present you 3 projects that we got the inspiration from. Many years ago, in 2013, within another European project, we went to Amsterdam for a site visit, and by that time, there was a specific support scheme in the Netherlands, and I don't know if this is still in force now, but it was the case by that time. And it was possible for a user to deliver electricity to the grid, and the amount of energy delivered to the grid could be deducted from the energy bill from the conventional energy supplier. So it was a kind of net metering scheme. And this was, again, very easy to do and to implement for one building with one single user, but it was very challenging for buildings with many different apartments. So for multi-apartment buildings, since to fulfill the requirements of the Dutch framework was necessary, so it was compulsory to divide the PV system in many different subsystems and to connect each PV system to each flat. So it was very expensive to do it in the case of very large building, such as the one that you have on the screen. But someone came with a solution. And in the case of Amsterdam, the solution maker was the grid operator. The name of the grid operator in Amsterdam is Alliander. And Alliander came to the municipality of Amsterdam and to this to similar building with a solution that was the following. Alliander proposed to turn the physical connection, so the expensive connection of the subsystems into each flat, to turn this physical connection into a virtual connection. And Alliander proposed to build just one single PV system connected to the grid as it was when there was a feed-in tariff, and to divide the production data among all the users of the building. And so it proposed to turn a physical infrastructure into that split of data, which was very clever at that time. And Alliander just set up a platform and awarded a so-called share of the production, a solar share, calculated with a specific rule by the grid operator. And this data is then sent to the energy supplier for building, to send the bill, sorry, for billing. And thanks to this way of doing, the owners got a cost saving on the PV system of approximately 1/3, which was 1/4, 1/3, which was already a lot. And this was done thanks to this new way of connecting the PV system and sharing it into the different building users. After that first project, I had the possibility and the chance to get the experiences from other projects in Europe, and especially in Germany. And there are two projects that we have analyzed in detail. One is in Heidelberg in Germany, and it's done by an energy cooperative. And This is the picture you have on the screen. So the cooperative is, you have the name Heidelberger Energiegenossenschaft, and more recently we also had a detailed analysis of a project done in Munich by a company at that time, which is called Polarstern, which also developed a self-consumption, collective self-consumption PV project in Munich, but not only. So they are basically the three projects from which we got the inspiration of what we do right now in Lyon. And recently, the European Commission decided to draft framework for the collective consumption of PV, and it has been done in November 2016 within what we called the winter package, which was the proposal from the European Commission to recast several directives, and among them there is the directive related to the promotion of the use of energy from renewable energy sources. And in the proposal from the Commission, we have an article 21, which is the following, so I will read it. Member states shall ensure that renewable self-consumers living in the same multi-apartment block are allowed to jointly engage in self-consumption as if they were an individual renewable self-consumer. So right now, this is a proposal. It is not implemented. It's not enforced. It's not in a directive, but we believe that it is going to be the case soon when the winter package will be turned into a real directive. It means that in the future, each member state will have to translate the directive into the national law to make this happen in all the European countries. Very quickly, Germany already implemented a legal framework for the collective self-consumption of PV. It was done last year in the Renewable Energy Act 2017, EEG 2017. This is the so-called Mieterstrom program, so electricity for tenants. And the German laws said that the electricity that is self-consumed within a collective self-consumption project will not be eligible for taxes and fees, and in particular, the electricity will not have to be a charge of the grid fee. So this is very something very progressive, but there's an exception, and the law said that one fee must be paid, which is the fee to support renewable energy systems, called EEG again. And to make such projects happen, the German laws also define financial support, which is a little bit complex to calculate, but it's approximately 2.5 euro cents per kilowatt hour. The production surplus can get the regular feed-in tariff to improve the business model of the PV system. And also, tenants that are involved in such projects must see their energy bill, their electricity bill reduced by 10%. So to also to make the tenants very benefit for from this project. So this is the basically a quick summary of the framework in Germany. France now has also a legal framework, also very new, so published last year. We have a law, we have a decree, we have now many details available to develop some projects. and I will summarize this right now. The concept is very easy to understand, so we call it collective self-consumption of PV, and this offers the possibility to split PV production data between several consumers, so what we call also virtual metering. And you have here a multi-apartment building. Each flat is connected to the public grid in red with a grid meter, and you have the private electricity grid in green on this diagram. And on the top of this building, you have a PV system, which is also connected to the public grid, as if all the electricity is injected into the grid. So first, it means that when we want to implement a collective self-consumption PV project, then we just do a business as usual. We connect the flats as they are usually connected to the grid, and we connect the PV system as it is usually to get the feed-in tariff. So this is very easy for project developers. And then the law says that the distribution network operator is allowed to split the production data between the consumers and to give them a share of the production, as if the PV system, a share of this PV system is connected directly for an individual self-consumption. So again, it's we replace a complex, expensive wiring infrastructure with data. This is basically the concept of collective self-consumption of photovoltaic. What are the main requirements and the limitations of the French framework? So first, the area where we can develop self-consumption projects. So the perimeter is that, so the limitation is that the producer or producers, because it can be more than one producer, and all consumers have to be connected to the same medium voltage, low voltage substation. And this is something quite positive, because it means that such project can be broader than just one building, can be in a small low voltage grid. So, but the requirement is that we have all the participants of one collective self-consumption project connected to the same substation. Then the producer and the consumers have to be member of a specific entity. We call it, it's a special purpose vehicle, SPV. It could be an association, it could be a company, but they have to be together in an organization to decide how to split the production data. So to decide which rule will be used to share the production data between consumers, and to send this rule to the grid operator that will split the production. Then the law says that there will be a specific grid fee for the electricity that is consumed by the users for the PV systems with a power less than 100 kilowatt peak. This specific grid fee is still under discussion, and we believe that the reduction of the grid fee will not be very important, and will in fact will not have very big impact on the business model. Also, something quite negative is that when we have a production surplus, then the production surplus is not eligible to a feed-in tariff. It means that we have to find someone that is willing to buy the electricity, and we need to negotiate the price for this electricity. And this has also a negative impact on the business model. But as you will see, even if we have some good technical possibility, the business model is strongly affected by fees and taxes. And I will explain you this in detail right now. So challenge one is to find a suitable business model for these projects. But here on the screen, the price of electricity in France. The price is regulated. It means that it's the same for all private consumers that wants to benefit from this regulated price. It's approximately 140 euro per megawatt hour. And you see that approximately 1/3 comes from the energy price itself. And then we have several fees and taxes. In purple, we have the grid fee, which is approximately 1/3 of the total price. We've got the fee for renewable energy sources. Then we have additional taxes and then VAT. And of course, when we want to develop a collective self-consumption project, we want to offer to the users a price that is similar to that regulated price. And so we have option one. We want to offer the same price for energy consumers. So we want them not to pay more than this value. And given that the electricity self-consumed will be charged with all the taxes, the grid fee, and the renewable energy fee, we can assess the revenue of the producer, the revenue that the producer will get from the production that is offered locally to the users. And as the specific grid fee is still under discussion, we have a range of price between 50 euro per megawatt hour and let's say 90 euro per megawatt hour, which is so worst case and best case. And in parallel, we still have a feed-in tariff. And when we compare these values with the regular feed-in tariff, we see that there are no reason why a producer should get involved in a self-consumption project, because doing so will decrease its revenues. So you better have to sell all the electricity to the feed-in tariff, which is approximately 110 euro per megawatt hour, rather than to join a self-consumption project, because it will see its revenue decreases. We have option two, is then to make the producer happy and to offer the producer the same revenue than the feed-in tariff. And by doing so, we need to add to this price a share of the grid fee, the fee to support renewable energy systems, the taxes, the VAT. And we see in this case that if we want to make the producer happy, then no consumer will join, because they will see a high rise of their energy bill. So this is why we face a very difficult challenge, very important challenge with this business model, because we can't make the producer and consumers happy. So this is challenge one. And because of this very complex business model, we have a second challenge, is the citizen engagement. How can we go to the user of the building and make them confident to switch from something very convenient, which is to pay a bill to a conventional energy supplier, into something really complex? And this is the real challenge to make them join such projects. So despite these two challenges. We have several projects ongoing in the Lyon-Confluence area, and I will give you some information about one specific project, which is called B2 plot. This is the reference that we use for the urban redevelopment project. So there has been an international design competition to select a developer to build this plot, and this competition has been designed again by the company in charge of the urban development, Lyon-Confluence, and the winner is a developer called Ogic. It's a French developer. Ogic has designed a plot composed of 5 buildings. The design has been made with 2 architects. One architect from Switzerland, Diener und Diener Architekten, and Clément Vergely, one architect from Lyon. And you have here an overview of the plot that has been designed. The construction is about to start. The building permit is there. There's now a legal process, so the developer needs to wait before starting the construction. But this construction will last 24 months, so 2 years, and those buildings and the PV system and the self-consumption project will be ready for 2020. So what is the solution found to overcome challenge 1, which is the weak business model? First, the company in charge of the redevelopment project, Lyon-Confluence, got involved in a task force led by 2 ministries, and this task force aims to find a way to simplify difficulties, problems that could be faced by a urban developer to demonstrate sustainable development projects. And within this task force, SPL reports difficulties that we face in the project to develop the collective self-consumption of PV. So the ministries are aware that this is something which is not easy to do. Then we also report to the energy regulator, French energy regulator, and we had a meeting with the energy regulator, and we send them an official request to inform them of our difficulties. But to summarize the situation, the French energy regulator is not really in favor of this project. Also, Smarter Together has a role in this project, because as the energy surplus cannot get a feed-in tariff, we see project developers using storage battery systems to limit the production surplus injected into the grid. But this has the negative impact on the business model. And as we wanted to test also the battery, the storage, this has been included in the Smarter Together project and will also be funded, so to reduce the cost of the storage. But the main solution that has been found to this weak business model is just to delete the capital cost of the PV system from the price that will be proposed to the users of the buildings. And how is it possible to do it? Simply, the capital cost of the PV system is not included in the energy price, but is included in the selling price of the flats and office places that is paid by the owners. And it means that owners, for that project, owners pay the PV system that will benefit to the users, to the consumers. and this is the main way to improve the business model to make this happen. Now, and it's going to be my last slide, and we will now switch to the just after to the questions. What is the solution found to overcome the challenge number 2, which is to make citizens, make users of the buildings involved in this project? What has been done is a partnership between the real estate developer, so OGIC once again, and some major French energy actors in order to increase and gain the confidence of future users. And the agreement has been signed between OGIC and EDF, so the major French utility. EDF is a project in charge of structuring the consumption project. EDF worked on the business model. EDF set up the specific purpose vehicle in which the producer and the consumers must be to define the production split rule. So everything has been done with the help of EDF. Also, we already have the company that will be in charge of designing and building the PV system and the storage. This is a subsidiary of EDF called EDF UNR. And we also have support from the grid operator, Enedis, also a subsidiary of EDF, for the deployment of smart meter in the area and to split the production data between consumers with a time step of 30 minutes, which is the requirement from the law. This is it. I give the floor back to Francisco, and I wait for your questions. Thank you very much.